Joy Boy is the one that will bring dawn to Wano and the world. And I believe Luffy is that person, but it's not because of destiny. So to explain myself, we're gonna be breaking down the history and prophecy of Joy Boy, and I'll be giving my theory on how Joy Boy passed on his dreams and will to Luffy. As always, if you guys enjoy content like this, make sure you subscribe and join our King Pirates crew. And if you have a good time watching this video, please drop a like for the YouTube algorithm. Thank you very much. Alright, but to start things off, let's just do it how we usually do it, and that is with a breakdown. And as far as Joy Boy goes, the first time that we found out about him was when he got name dropped in Fishman Island. This was when Neptune revealed information about the poneglyphs in Fishman Island and talked about how Joy Boy wrote an apology. But before we move on any further, I actually want to make some clarifications, and that's because Joy Boy is really two things in the story. First off, there's Joy Boy the boy, a real person that was alive during ancient history. And second of all, there's Joy Boy the title, something that will be inherited and fulfill a prophecy. Ironically, we kind of found out about both of these things during Fishman Island, but to make things easier, let's break down these things separately, starting off with Joy Boy the boy. And Joy Boy the boy, as Neptune mentioned, is a person from ancient history. He not only had a friendship with the previous Poseidon, but had also made a promise. And this promise involved using the Noah and Poseidon's powers in some way. But unfortunately, for some reason, Joy Boy could not fulfill this promise, so he ended up writing an apology. Now, as for what that promise was and why Joy Boy couldn't fulfill it, I'll cover that in the final section when I talk about my theory. But yeah, from the information we got from Neptune, we not only found out that Joy Boy is a person from ancient history, but he was also an ally of not only the Fishman, but also ancient weapon Poseidon. But a minor detail here that we also need to focus on is that Joy Boy gave the Fishman poneglyphs, establishing a connection between Joy Boy and the poneglyphs. And that just opens up the door to a lot more answers. First off, it connects them to the Great Kingdom, because as discovered by the people of Ohara, the Great Kingdom was an ancient kingdom that was incredibly powerful, but ultimately they ended up losing and getting destroyed by the world government. However, before they were completely wiped out, they created the poneglyphs to preserve their history against the world government. And that information makes perfect sense from everything else we've seen in the story. The world government is known to just completely wipe out anything they don't like, and this would also explain why there's a void century. So with this information, we can connect Joy Boy to it because of the poneglyphs, which likely means he was part of the Great Kingdom and an enemy of the world government. And on top of that, another connection we can make because of the poneglyphs is what allies Joy Boy and the Great Kingdom had. And that's because throughout the story, we've seen which kingdoms were given and have protected very important poneglyphs. And those kingdoms include Wano, who were not only the creators of the poneglyphs, but also have a road poneglyph. The Minks also had a road poneglyph, which makes sense given their allegiance to the Kozuki clan. Of course, as we mentioned earlier, Fishman Island was also given multiple poneglyphs, and even the people of Shandora were given a very important poneglyph that had information on Poseidon. But perhaps the most interesting one is Alabasta having a poneglyph about Pluton, and that's because originally they were a kingdom on the other side as one of the original 20 world government kingdoms. I'm not going to talk too much about them in this video, but if you want to hear my theory on why they betrayed the world government, you can check out this video. But yeah, with that said, we can pretty much gather that the Great Kingdom had allies of Wano, the Minks, Shandora, the Fishmen, and Alabasta. Keep those in mind for when we talk about potential sun symbolism later. But moving on from that, let's talk about the biggest piece of information about Joy Boy the boy, which is that he was the one that left the One Piece at Laugh Tale. We know this information because we saw the reaction of the Roger pirates, and Roger addressed Joy Boy directly, and we can also further confirm this because of the road poneglyphs which lead to Laugh Tale, which means that Joy Boy and the Great Kingdom not only left the One Piece at Laugh Tale, but created a map for people to get there. Beyond that information though, there are some new minor details that we found out about in the manga, so if you're not yet caught up to the manga, you can jump to the next section. But to start things off, the first thing I want to talk about is the sun god Nika, which could be connected to Joy Boy, and there's many things that hint towards that, like Nika being the one to free the slaves, which kind of ties more to the prophecy side of things. But probably the biggest hint is all the sun symbolism we see from all the allies of the Great Kingdom. With all the allies I named earlier, all of their symbols look very similar to the sun, so I think it's very possible that the sun god Nika and Joy Boy were the same person. And finally, the last bit of information that we just found out is that Zunisha was also an ally of Joy Boy. Now, this bit of information shouldn't really be that surprising given the connection Zunisha has with not only the Minks, but also Momonosuke. My theory on this is that Zunisha is ancient weapon Uranus, which if you want to hear more about that, you can check out this video. But even if my theory is wrong, this kind of just re-emphasizes the connection that the Minks and Wano have to Joy Boy. But with that said, that is all the information we know about Joy Boy the boy, so let's talk about the one that relates more to Luffy, which is Joy Boy the prophecy. And Joy Boy the prophecy is a prophecy that's been talked about by many different people, and this prophecy pretty much states that a new Joy Boy will be coming to completely change the world. And also, what seemingly makes this prophecy very deeply connected to destiny is that it has a very specific timeline. Back in Fishman Island, we kind of indirectly found out about this Joy Boy prophecy, and that was when Oda Hime mentioned that another person will come come along to guide Shirahoshi. So this pushes forth an idea that a new Joy Boy is destined to show up at this time to guide Shirahoshi. This prophecy is further emphasized from multiple conversations we've heard from the Sea Kings, who've mentioned multiple times about this meeting of the new sovereigns. And from them, we also know that this new Joy Boy, along with Shirahoshi, is destined to fulfill the promise involving the Noah. Beyond that, we have even more information from the Roger Pirates, who mentioned they were too early, and specifically from Kozuki Oden, we got a lot more information. First off, he gave an exact timeline when Joy Boy will appear, which is present day, 20 years from his death. Also, he specifically said that the new Joy Boy will bring forth this massive war, and it will be the day that everything is overturned. And it's also the reason why Wano needs to open his borders to welcome and support Joy Boy. Now, all of this information really adds up together and makes a lot of sense, especially when you think about the information about Joy Boy the boy. With Wano being a previous ally of Joy Boy, it would make sense for them to support him. And also, given that the previous Joy Boy could not fulfill the promise to Fishman Island, it makes sense that the new one does. But it's also important to note that all of this information emphasizes on a specific time frame, which does further push forth this notion of destiny. Beyond that though, there are other people that know about this prophecy, like King and Kaido, and there's also the dawn of the new world, which the Scabbards and the Minks have been continuously talking about, which is likely referring to the same prophecy Oden talks about. Now, the interesting thing about the dawn of the new world is that multiple Scabbards and Minks believe that Luffy will be the one to bring that dawn. And honestly, when we look at other parts of the prophecy, like being a person that guides Shirahoshi, Luffy just makes sense as the new Joy Boy. So if we just look at things at face value, it seems like Luffy is the prophesized Joy Boy, a person destined for greatness from the moment he was born. But this is where I'm gonna disagree, because while I think that Luffy is Joy Boy, I don't quite believe in the prophecy and the destiny part. Don't get me wrong, it's not like I completely disregard prophecy, because it's definitely real, as we've seen with Charlie. I just can't imagine a story with freedom as a core theme ends up using fate for its main character, which completely goes against free will. So to explain myself further, I'm gonna tell you guys my theory on Joy Boy and how Luffy became Joy Boy. To start things off, looking at all the information that we've gathered, I think we have a pretty basic storyline figured out for Joy Boy. Joy Boy is clearly from the Great Kingdom. Maybe he was the leader, or maybe he was just an important figure, but he was definitely associated with it, and he had allies in many kingdoms that we've seen throughout the story, including Ancient Weapon Poseidon. There's also the possibility that Water 7 was involved with Joy Boy, given that they had the blueprints to Pluton, but as of right now, there's just not enough information to be certain. What we can be certain of though is that ultimately Joy Boy was defeated by the world government, which is likely why he could not fulfill his promise. Following that though, he quickly began working with the people of Wano to create the poneglyphs, because the world government had begun to completely wipe them from history, creating the Void Century. So because of that, Joy Boy and the Kozuki clan created the poneglyphs, gave them out to allies, and scattered them across the world. And with these poneglyphs, it's important to note that there were many different kinds. One of the important ones are the Rio poneglyphs. They tell the story about the Void Century. These are the ones that Robin are specifically collecting. They also are important because some of them contain information about the ancient weapons. And then the other important poneglyphs are the road poneglyphs that lead to Laugh Tale. And that gets us to the next major thing Joy Boy did besides create the poneglyphs, which is leave the One Piece at Laugh Tale. Now, I'm not gonna sit here and try to theorize what the One Piece is. I have no idea. But I do think we could theorize what Joy Boy's motivations were based off of his actions. Because if we think about it, did Joy Boy really do all of this because he knew a prophecy was going to come true and that his name was destined to be passed on? Or did he take all of these actions to maybe create a prophecy himself because he knew that along with the passing of time, there are two other things that cannot be stopped, and that is inherited will and people's dreams. This was something we found out on chapter 100, and it's an idea that's been re-emphasized throughout the story with characters like Dr. Hiraduk. And we also see this idea through our main characters with the Straw Hats. Every single Straw Hat carries an inherited will of some way and pushes forward chasing their dreams. And that to me has been a defining theme within One Piece. It's people's dreams and actions that create the results, not destiny or fate. So I think as far as the Joy Boy prophecy goes, as opposed to it being something that is destined to happen, I think it's something that Joy Boy bet on because he took the actions to pass on his will and dreams. First off, him creating the poneglyphs and preserving the history of the Void Century was one way of doing so. And also, just with the existence of the poneglyphs alone, you get people like the citizens of Ohara and Robin that have dreams of solving this mystery. In a similar manner, leaving the One Piece at Laugh Tale does the same thing. Not only did he physically leave information about everything and his story at Laugh Tale, but by creating this treasure in this unreachable island, he knew that people's dreams of freedom and exploration would lead the right people there. And I think this idea makes even more sense when you look at the fact that even Joy Boy doesn't seem to know who the new Joy Boy is gonna be, because when the Roger Pirates reached Laugh Tale, they found out about everything, but the one one thing they did not know was who this new Joy Boy was gonna be. All they knew was that a new Joy Boy was coming. In fact, Roger thought it was gonna be his son, and it's probably the reason he had a son in the first place. Furthermore, if we look at Roger's actions right before his death, it almost feels like he's passing on Joy Boy's will. Right before his dying moments, he incites a new age of piracy, which could be seen as passing on Joy Boy's will by incentivizing people's dreams of freedom. So in the end, I don't think the Joy Boy prophecy is a destiny, but rather a bet that Joy Boy makes that inherited will in people's dreams will create this destiny. The next question you might have though is why exactly is this prophecy so specific? Not only in terms of a time frame, but exactly what's gonna happen with a great war coming? Well, I think first off, as far as time frame goes, I actually think this part could be connected to destiny. Except this destiny is not related to Joy Boy, but instead is that they have to wait for Shirahoshi to be born. So I think the only part that fate plays into this prophecy is waiting for the right time for the ancient weapons to be active again. So as far as Roger goes, I don't think he was too early because he wasn't the right guy for the job, but rather he was too early because the ancient weapons weren't ready to be used yet. As far as how specific the prophecy is, talking about how a great war is coming, I think that just goes back to the idea of freedom. Because as we know, the world government that defeated the Great Kingdom and is currently ruling the world goes completely against freedom. So if Joy Boy believed that people's dreams of freedom will prevail, there's no way that the world government can remain in power. And he probably knew, having lost to them himself, that in order to defeat them, you will need ancient weapons and a great war to solve it. So as far as the specifics of the prophecy goes, I think it just relates more to the ancient weapons and more so a prediction that the world government needs to be taken down. And with all that said, that gets us to the question of how exactly Luffy became Joy Boy, which I sincerely believe he did with his own power and beliefs. First off, in terms of his beliefs, Luffy, just like Roger and also probably Joy Boy, has a very strong belief in freedom. It's one of his defining themes and one of the things that really motivates him, and we've seen this reiterated time and time again, specifically when he mentioned what it meant to be the Pirate King. On top of that, it's also been hinted that Luffy's dream is exactly the same as Roger's, so I think a big part of how Luffy became this prophesized Joy Boy is because of his own beliefs. On top of that, we also have to give credit to his power and abilities, not just in terms of how strong he's gotten, but also his ability to gain allies across the world. Now, of course, I will also acknowledge that Luffy is definitely a special character. He comes from a very special lineage, so it's not like he's some rando that just made this happen himself. I'm sure the Will of D plays a pretty strong factor here as well, but I just don't have a strong theory on that. And there's also the interesting factor of Shanks' role in the Straw Hat, which I'll probably save for a future video. But at the end of the day, even though Luffy is a special person in a special circumstance, I still think he became Joy Boy through his own actions and beliefs. But that's gonna do it for my theory. Thank you guys for watching. Leave your thoughts in the comments. Get yourself some One Piece manga with the link in the description. And in my hand, I have a bounty poster of Ace, Sabo, or Mihawk. If you guess it wrong, you have to